When should we kick off? So, Katie, just before, so you're gonna go through the your top tips list sort of thing. Is that one of the things or stuff?
Yeah. I just obviously everybody's received the information we sent through, so it gives you, as we spoke about last week, it kind of gives you a bit of an idea around if you have got a CV, how best to improve it. If you haven't got a CV, then really you should have one, and how to kind of create one. I think it's probably important to say here that there are a lot of people who have got various different opinions and ideas around what a perfect CV should look like and what the content should be. I think it's important to say that what we're sort of the advice that we're giving, and we're quite happy to give either on this call or offline, is very much based on Mike's 22 years within the recruitment field, my experience both in-house and agency side, and then obviously Aira's experience as well from working within the business and coming across people on a day-to-day basis. Very much we wouldn't be offended if you don't take the advice, but as we said, it's very much around us being able to guide you as best as we can based on our experience. But I think it's important, your CV should really tell a very logical story about yourself, so it's still important to keep it true to you and something that you feel very comfortable with and talking through. So I think just a kind of quick thing is that on average these days, there's a lot of statistics that go around how long recruiters such as ourselves, but also hiring managers, look at your CV. On average now it's between 5 and 7 seconds. Now when you think about that, it's hardly anything. So it's important first off to ensure that your CV is logical, it's readable, it's very simple and easy on the eye for somebody to read it when it lands on their desk. One of the things that Mike and I have been talking about recently is an article that came out about sort of buzzwords, what recruiters absolutely sort of detest these days, the kind of lingo that goes on CVs, and an article was done where they spoke to over 550 recruiters across really appealing industries, basically. Around they were looking at about 4,000 CVs, and of those, what are the kind of words that kind of turn them off even sort of looking through somebody's CV. One of the sixth position was passionate, and I think probably throughout everybody's career somebody has put passionate on there. I know I have at some stage, and I think what they were saying was that actually you couldn't really quantify what you're passionate about. If you say you're passionate about Treasury, how do you prove that within words? The next one that came up was best, which was the top one. I'm best at. The recruiters failed to indicate a strong ego and a sense of self-importance. And then it was followed closely by motivated, dedicated and proven. And what the article was saying was it's constant. Everybody puts that on there. It doesn't sort of stand you out from anyone. These days, there's a thesaurus, and people have suggested that perhaps you look at things like that. So it could be that you get a buzz from working on something, or you get a buzz from being a treasurer within X industry. You get energized by, you have a zeal for. So it's just keeping in mind it's keeping your CV as a live document. So even if you're in a position and you're quite happy there and you're not looking to leave, it's always good just to sense check your CV and make sure that you're not falling into the the trap that actually when you do need to move roles, you're not going to be disregarded from the word go because of some of the words that you put in. So when we kind of go through your CV and kind of how it's positioned, first of all, it's around the title of your CV. A lot of people will save their CV under the title CV. It's very outdated, and you know, if you save your CV just under your name, if it lands in somebody's inbox, it's pretty clear that it's going to be your CV. So that's kind of the first thing. There's a lot of questions around how long should a CV be. If you Google, people say it should just be two pages. As I said at the beginning, it has to be a logical story about you. So long as it's logical and it's straightforward, really, if it's over 3 pages, it's not a problem, but just make sure that you're keeping it very relevant and you're focusing on achievements, which I'll move on to in a bit.
Katie, sorry to just jump in, but just for the people listening, all of what Katie's saying, we will have sent to you, but also some people have just joined us recently. We'll resend it out to the entire group. We've got all the people that are attending today. So she's, you know, expanding on all of the points in there, so you'll get more, so feel free to take notes. But we will have bullet points there as well after the meeting, so we can send it out to everybody. But carry on, Katie, off to you.
Again, there's always a discussion around your personal details and what personal details should go on and what personal details should be kept off. So we're talking about having your photo, having your date of birth, having your marital status. Basically, again, a CV should make the reader single you out based on your skills and your experience. It shouldn't be based on anything to do with how old you are or what you look like. And so, you know, in various different countries, you know, you want to avoid anything that could indirectly show discrimination or allow somebody to, as I said, indirectly choose you for the wrong reasons. When you are based, I don't know, sort of scanning across, when you're based in France and in Switzerland, it's common practice for them for the hiring managers to want to see your age, your marital status, and a photo. That's just common practice in those 2 countries. But generally speaking, because of the discrimination acts across the world, you really don't feel that you have to, but it's just common practice in those 2 countries for you to do that. References, a lot of people always put references on the bottom of their CV. It's really, again, not something that's mandatory. It's not needed. If you did need extra space on the CV, this is one of the areas to sort of take off so that you've got a bit more space on your CV. Again, it's common practice, and Mike and Aira will confirm this, that generally speaking, if somebody offers you a job, they will always take references. They'll always ask you to provide references. I think one of the other things is, and I have seen this more so in-house than I have done when I've been in agency, but if you put references on the bottom of your CV, we live in a world where it's a very small world when it comes to Treasury professionals, and even though there's a lot of you, there's a lot of networking going on, and therefore people know each other. What can happen is if you put a referee on there, the hiring manager may look and go, oh yeah, I know Bob from blah, blah, blah. He's a really good mate of mine. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a chat with him to get a bit of insight into Carol, to see actually what she's like before I interview. And they'll do that off the record. But actually, I have seen and I've witnessed, and I've been on the back of conversations where I've had line managers that have done that, and subsequently the candidate has then been approached by their current company and said, look, we hear you're looking, what's going on? So to avoid the possibility of doing that, keep it off your CV is what we would suggest. Email addresses.
Sorry, on that. Sorry, we've got a question about that from Jonathan, which he's just said about adding a sentence to the effect that references available on request. It's just like the bit at the top. You know it's a CV, and you know that people will require, and different companies have different reference policies. So I wouldn't even bother, because it's just you're going to take references anyway. That's standard. An actual fact, sometimes it won't even be done by the employer. I was asked by a client, "Oh, have you got references on this person?" I went, "No." Oh, well, why not? I said, "Well, because you've got a referencing agency that you're going to use." And they said, "Oh, yeah, we are." I said, "Well," and also they said, "Oh, have you got a copy of their right to work?" We asked to people confirm they've got a right to work, but I said it would be pointless me every time taking a photocopy of their passport, because all we do is then throw it in the bin or scan it in, because they say, "Oh no, I need to see one within the past 3 months." So, it might take 6 months, might take a year. So it's similar to references. So I think that's, it's not a criticism, but Jonathan, it's more, I wouldn't bother, you're just taking up space. So yeah. Sorry, Katie, carry on.
That's fine. And then email addresses.
Make them professional.
Yeah,
thank you. That was,
make sure it's professional. Again, seen lots of variations of this, but what we see is boring. Your first name, your last name at gmail.com. That's perfect for a CV. Again, I
love martinis doesn't work.
Yeah, you're opening yourself up to be discriminated against. And also, one thing to note is that 68% of employers will look at LinkedIn and Facebook as part of the hiring process. They will do that. The next thing to suggest, and Mike is quite passionate about this if you've been on our website, is around providing a CV summary rather than a personal statement. Again, we're going into the trap of being passionate and motivated and things like that. A CV summary should really include information that's relevant to the role that you're applying for. So if you've got a job description in front of you, it's around actually look at it from a client's perspective. What are the major areas that are outlined in this role that are needed, and what can you deliver based on that and the business that you're going for, and that forms your CV summary. A personal statement is just quite fluffy, and it doesn't really do anything or set you apart from anybody else. If you look at the 5 to 7 second rule, what they want to see is that you stand out from another treasurer or treasury manager based on that CV summary. So really have a think about that. CV, again, this may seem obvious to people, but trust me, and I speak for Mike and Aira, we've seen this several times. Your CV should be in chronological order, so your most recent role first and working backwards. So many times seen jumbled up things. We've seen, the first job role that somebody's had outside of university, but they've had like 15 years experience. Again, the 5 to 7 second rule, and also you need to make it clear for the reader, and that just doesn't happen if you've got it back to front. And again, standard, which is another thing that raises quite a lot of questions, is around having no gaps on your CV. So, if you had time out to raise a family, or you had time out to go on to new ventures or just test the water in another area, make sure that you've captured that on your CV. There should be no gaps on your CV at all. If there's gaps on your CV, it automatically shouts alarm bells. Why is there a gap? What are they trying to hide, etc., etc. So it's better to actually know what you've been doing. In the group prior to this, we had somebody that asked, they had some time out and started up their own fashion business, which wasn't at all relevant to Treasury. But actually, starting up your own business, there's a lot of crossover skill sets that work and can be seen within Treasury. And I think these days, if somebody's been made redundant, it's not a black mark. It becomes part of the norm rather than a unique thing. And actually, people would prefer to see people that have actively been working on different things to keep their mind active, to keep them in sort of up to date with the market, than just having a complete blank. So don't think about sort of leaving off any experience. I don't know, Mike and Ava, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I'll get Ava in a moment to pull out for perhaps more, she focuses on the more junior. There was a very relevant question from, and in fact, it's about relevance. Masha, she's saying, how many years should you go back? With 20 years plus, how far back is relevant? And I think it actually comes down to the last word, relevant. It depends on how much is relevant to a job you're applying for. And I think that's how you then reconstruct a CV, because we've talked about it being a living, breathing document. It's not just a static thing. It's a phone book. It stays there. Boom. That's it. What when you're applying for one role, say you're a treasurer that has a particular skill set in biotech and chemicals, you're going to want to bring out some of those skills. Or say you're a treasurer that's done 3 startups, or a treasurer that's worked for 2 private equity firms. Those are the things you're going to want to bring out to the fore. And then it depends, then going back through your CV, you might change it, you might cut bits out and things like that. So with 20 plus years, you might go back to, I saw a CV for a guy earlier who was doing a podcast with, and about 10, 15 years ago, then it becomes much more work for this company. These were the 3 positions I had, because they're not particularly relevant, and it was 20 years ago. But, there were a couple of bits further back where he was working for a company that if he was applying for certain roles, I said, oh, that might be interesting. You've already worked in that sector a couple of times. So I think that would be, one of the key things. And then there was also, before it scrolls off the page, still looking at it, Carol mentioned, are there certain skills or qualifications that if they aren't on the resume of a treasurer would result in that resume be immediately dismissed? If so, what? Again, I think it's going to depend on the job you're applying for. If someone says you must have CTP in the US, or a Treasury qualification, AMCT UK. Sometimes in Europe, you've got some of the Attel are doing one, a few others. If they requisite, then it's going to be on there. Again, you're going to tailor your CV according to a situation. It's not just static and everything else. So I think that varies. Ava, for the UK market, maybe more. What would you say?
In terms of qualifications, I'd say in the UK market, especially at the sort of junior to mid level, what I've noticed recently is that roles that are coming out, it is fairly critical now that they expect candidates to either be studying towards their ACT or sort of already qualified, and that is sort of one of the main criteria when they are looking for candidates to join the companies. Sort of speaking to a few candidates recently, sort of a lot of people will sort of be in the in-between recently due to COVID, due to this horrible market that's not been the most positive recently. But I think if you've got that gap from sort of, say, October last year where you left a contract role trying to find a new role, if you can show that you've done something positive to forward your career by doing this AMCT or doing some type of studies, saying you've done a lot of networking, even saying you've taken part in a bounce back program, I think that would show that you're a proactive individual that would then step you in front of other people applying for roles.
Well, I think I also want to totally steal Ashish's word of, I'm going to have that now, about relevance. And I think that's one of the key things is it relevant? And that's what's got to be on there. If you've spent 6 months doing your allotment, I don't care. If you've been doing this, it's not relevant to a job application for a role within Treasury. I mean, Katie, with yourself, we've got then, and again, it comes down to Simha. We've got there. He's asked how much elapsed time between roles is considered a gap, and he said, sometimes a couple of months now. I think it's a different world, post COVID. I think, 6 months is normal. It was before. It was like that. That was not the normal, and then now it is. I mean, a year's a bit long, but I think coming out of this as well, if someone had a year out and just said, actually, I went into it. I spoke to another guy, and another candidate, and they said, well, I just lost my job just as COVID started. Well, they were a couple of months before. They're quite senior. So they've been 8-9 months. And I'm like, why is that a bother? You know, because it's 9 months. It was 3 months of this, starting to look at the retraining. Boom, COVID comes in, market's closed. And then you've got probably 3 months recovery at least. So if they've had most of this year out, who's to judge? I mean, Katie, what would you say?
I agree. I think provided you know, you can talk through that, I don't think it's a problem. I think you know, as Mike said, after this year is especially tough. You know, I had a candidate who accepted a position in January, was due to start in March. Lockdown came, it was pulled off of the table completely, and since then he's just been looking within the market. And you know, we know that the market isn't as buoyant as it was, and as Mike said, everybody's in recovery period. That isn't going to come as a surprise to people hiring at all. I think my prediction will be that a lot of people will suddenly, from September onwards, go, right, I need somebody now. And actually, you know, the people that have been out of work are probably going to be ideal because they can start a lot quicker than other people. But this year, I think, you know, it isn't an issue at all.
So we interrupted you though. You're in your flow. What next?
So that it actually touches on to the next point around you know, how much do you put on your CV? And as we said, you know, it has to be relevant. Standard procedure tends to be the 10 to 15 years experience, or the 5 to 6 most current positions, and then as Mike said, you know, you expand on those a lot more, but then you know, you just write down what your other experience was behind that. That then leads on to bullet points. Again, seen very many CVs that have just been paragraph after paragraph, and again, it just isn't easy for a reader. I have not looked at people before when I've been in-house, when I've just been confronted with a long essay. It just doesn't work. Your bullet points, you know, you need to have bullet points. You need to have about 6 achievements for each role on average. And when we say achievements, this isn't job duties. So it isn't regurgitating your job description. We all know that when you know, even from Treasury analyst level all the way through, you guys come with a certain toolkit of experience, otherwise you wouldn't be doing the job role that you're doing. So it's a given that you have a certain skill set and you have a certain level of experience. What's going to stand you out from the next person who's in the same job role as you is actually what you've done to add value to that business. As Mike said previously, it's around what's the paracetamol to ease that pain.
Are you their paracetamol? So basically, if you're applying for a role, I've written about this in the past, you've got to be their paracetamol. So look at someone's headaches. You know, and a practical example, again, Factor Treasurer I've spoken to a number of times. You know, we were looking at a job that he was going to apply for. We deep dove into the job and I said, look, why haven't they promoted the senior treasury manager / assistant treasurer to be the treasurer? What's the reason? And we just made some assumptions. The fact that he probably only had 2 or 3 years in that role and he was still 2 or 3 years away from the number 1 job. He hadn't managed too many staff. You know, it was a big team, so he probably was going to struggle. So I said, so when you go to them, the key things, as Katie's just put there, and she said about 6 bullet points. There's a reason called bullet points, old publishing and stuff like that. 6 bullets in a gun. That's what it used to be. So maximum of 6. If you can get across what you are and who you are, what your top 3 or 4 achievements are, in 3 or 4 achievements, maybe a description of some of the other things you did, but not at too much length, then do it. And that's what we did with this guy. And he brought it to life, didn't he? And we talked about it. And it was like, you know, how he managed big teams, how he'd done this, how he'd implemented a treasury system. And immediately he got through from, he'd done over 100 applications to suddenly he got through to interview, got to final round interview. Didn't quite get there, but, you know, we're going to keep going with him. And Katie, sorry, again, is that right?
Yeah, and I think when we say achievements, it's very much around what did you identify, what did you do, how did you go about doing it, more importantly, what was the result or benefit or outcome or impact or value that this had on the business. Now, it doesn't mean that you had to lead something. It could be you were involved in something that added value to the business. It needs to be something that's tangible or was a noticeable difference. And it contributed to the benefits of the organisation as a whole. So that's what's going to stand you out from somebody else. And this bit is probably the most important, I would say, on a CV to get right, because it is the thing that's going to stand you out from somebody else. All too often, it's so easy to fall into the trap of just downloading duties, your day-to-day. No one cares what you do. Well, obviously they care what you do on a day-to-day, but they would expect that. That's an expectation that they have, that you would do the day-to-day duties of whatever your job title is. It's what else do you do above and beyond that that's going to make the difference, because then they can identify it to actually the pain and the challenge that they have, and you're the person that can solve that for them.
So just to address that, sorry, just again, is one of the great things, Carol, you know, it's great. We've got some really good questions this week. Thank you very much, everyone. Carol's just jumped in with her resumes about problems, actions, and things like that. Is it okay, some of the duties, just as Katie's described there, do like internal controls, documentation, you drive cash flow without giving away the store? It's okay, but just don't describe the store. Don't give away everything. Just internal controls, you know, internal controls, this bit, like mini segments, like bullet points, because people will scan read. They don't want this. And, you know, the other reason to have a CV resume is for hook points or hooks within the interview. People have said, you know, we joked about whether the CV's extinct, just have a LinkedIn profile. It's not detailed enough, and it doesn't address a specific job. The other thing is, you get there, a lot of you treasurers will do this, that when you're interviewing someone, you'll look at someone's resume and say, oh, can you just talk us through your role here? And they'll have made little hook points or notes, and that's what it is. You're giving them some hooks upon which, oh, you did documentation, just like Carol has said. Oh, what level did you let that, you know, explain it at an interview? Because someone will say, I don't care about your documentation. I don't care about your internal controls. Oh, I cared about your profitability and how you help that as a treasurer. Tell us about that, please. And that, you know, and then the other, you know, you go to your next interview. Oh, you did internal controls. We had a fraud here 2 years ago. How do you do that? Different people, different problems, different paracetamol, different headaches.
And as Mike said, it just gives the opening for them to delve a bit deeper and have that free-flowing conversation when they interview you. I think somebody mentioned it on email about sort of where do you put qualifications and additional things that you've done, like bounce back and things like that. With qualifications, relevant qualifications. Don't list, you know, again, I've seen it on specifically CVs within the UK where everybody lists every single GCSE they've done, every single class they've taken. It just isn't relevant. So the qualifications need to be relevant, and again, they need to be in chronological order. I think in terms of somebody mentioned where would you put, say, the bounce back program. You can add something else underneath the qualifications that says additional courses or experience, and again list the relevant ones underneath there. The other thing that surprises me to some extent, but a lot of people don't add this, and that's systems. So there's a paragraph that says systems. Include Microsoft Office. I know that sometimes it's a given, but actually it's amazing how many people sometimes don't have don't have knowledge of that. Also, it's so important as well to list any TMS that you've worked with, because actually it could be, so for example, I have a client that's got a role on who wants somebody that's very system savvy, and they've highlighted certain systems that are of interest to them. So obviously from my perspective, I'm going to look at CVs with people that have got their systems that they've worked on listed, rather than having to then try and fathom out if they've worked on any systems. So make sure that you do add all of your systems experience as well, whether it's something that you've done now or done before. It's important to put it down. And generally speaking, I think that's probably the very top line kind of information. As Mike said, for those of you who've received the information, there's a lot that delves into, there's a guide which delves into a lot more detail around each of the areas that I've kind of pulled out. Also, there's some information around sort of phrases and buzzwords that that help you to write those achievements. So that for those of you that haven't had that information, we will send that across.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, and one of the other things is make sure you spell check and grammar check.
How many mangers do we read a day? As in, instead of managers.
Yeah.
Keep going. What else? What's the other ones?
I mean, it sounds very basic, but you would not be surprised. And I think the other thing that I found over the last few weeks has been that I'm recruiting for positions in France, and I'm asking for CVs in English to showcase their fluency in English.
Yeah.
And again, if you are translating into a different language, again, make sure that you've got somebody that you can somebody can have a look at it and ensure that there's, again, no spelling mistakes or grammar, just a general kind of overview. That's another thing for people you know, who have got languages. It's really important to list those. Again, where you've got sort of your systems, etc., just put languages and the level. So if you're fluent, if you're intermediate, or if you're a beginner, it's really important to have those listed as well.
Well, I think there's a few other bits that you mentioned right at the top of it, and sort of no fancy logos, you know, unless sometimes they can add a little bit, but still not keen. No fancy fonts. We've seen so many, haven't we, with like sort of nice super Cyrillic, and like really just stop that. You know, make it readable. Think about your audience thing. We're going to come back to some of the questions we've got on the side here. No mixed colours. Just, you know, plain black with sometimes maybe some, I've got, you know, one here which is quite nicely done with a bit of blue in there and stuff, but sometimes we've seen in it's been literally all the colours of the rainbow. And you've seen that, Ava, with some of the more junior CVs, haven't you, where they try and sort of beef it up a bit, don't they? I think with, you know, how many colours can we get in it?
I know, I think sometimes sort of there's different areas and different sort of types of roles in which you want to have a creative looking CV. I mean, if you're applying for a textiles designer job, then yeah, you might want it to look a bit funky, but you guys are sort of no, you're very sensible, you're trying to save money, so they just want the black and white of what it is you're doing, rather than, I've seen someone put a timeline of sort of what they did in 1975 up until 2018. I don't need to see an actual picture of a timeline. Just put it in your
one, we can't mention who it is, but it's a pyramid. It's a pyramid of his different skills, and he's at the centre of this pyramid, and this is what he gives us and stuff like that. And I can tell you where I can put the pyramid.
And I think you've got to think about your audience throughout this. And you know, one of the roles that I had in-house was for fashion, and you know, there is an expectation of, as we've talked about, having creativity, because you're applying for a creative role. So if you can't do that, then there's an issue. But actually what happens is, when the likes of you or I, unless you're an expert at this creativity and Apple and whatever, Photoshop and whatever, what tends to happen is you run into the risk of things becoming a mistake. So when you're hyperlinking, you've got a logo that's supposed to hyperlink you. If you click on it, straight back to the page. So many times I've hyperlinked and it doesn't work. Just be very, very careful. Simple, clean, straightforward is the way to go in your industry, definitely.
So just going through a few more of the questions we've got on here. RJ asked, do you need to include, if you participate in the seminar as a speaker or in a round table? Round table, if you got 3 or 4 of you where it's, you're sort of showing your thought leadership, definitely. If there's 25 of you, yeah, why bother? I think, the fact you might have gone to 15 Eurofinance conferences is great for you, but I think only if you've actually moved forward with, given some thought leadership piece. If you've actually been an independent speaker, definitely get it on your CV. Definitely, because people want to see that. They want to know that you're, recognizing your industry, and also your presentation skills will be up there. And that means that, any CFO you're going to be talking to think, actually, that guy, I could put him in front of the board. He's presented 7 times to this senior leadership panel. Yeah, brilliant. Away you go, sort of thing. And it doesn't also have to be just that point. You don't have to just if you've done external events. It can also be that you've presented, for the past 10, 2 or 3 companies, the Treasury leadership thing to your kickoff meeting. Oh, right. How many were there of you? 50? Oh, no, it was to the entire company of 1,700. 5,000. I stood at the front of the room. Wow, hang on. That'll come on to next week where we're in LinkedIn, where you can put that also, if it was videoed, and stuff like that. But, that one. And Katie, you think the same? Ray, you think the same? Put that sort of stuff. What other stuff do you need on there and recommend, would you say? I'll read out the next question.
Maybe show a bit of personality, sort of hobbies that are different.
Yeah.
For example, Mike and I know someone who climbed Mount Everest and wondered whether he should put that on his CV.
Yeah, it's the coolest thing ever.
Put that you have climbed Mount Everest successfully on your CV.
Yeah.
So I think it helps to show a bit of personality and that you're not just a treasurer, because if you're going to be in the office with them, they're going to be like your second family. You're going to spend a lot of time. So they're going to want someone they can bounce off of, someone who's not just a maths whiz. You've kind of got to show a bit of personality, but don't go over the top, I'd say.
So, and I was going to bring in that Ian asked as well, do you recommend a key skills section separate from work? I think work experience, I think it depends again on, it's going to be achievement focused, Ian. It's going to be about, that's what people buy on. It's your CV is the same as LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an active showcase for you. But before that, your CV is your key to getting an interview. It's your convincer, if you like. It's actually, oh, hang on, as Katie said right back at the beginning, 5 to 10 seconds. Okay, this person's worthy. It's also not particularly true that it's 5 to 7 seconds before they reject you. And that's like, hang on, is this person rejectable? No, they're not rejectable. They're on the read more sort of section, or I'm going to read more. And they might look through. My slight concern when you say about a key skills section is I would expect everyone on this Zoom call to have quite a lot of basic treasury skills to a certain level. So I would say work experience, you perhaps sort of tried as an amalgam of the two of them. So it's what key skills do you have, but it's in your work experience. So you demonstrate it. So I implemented this treasury management system. Usually it takes 3 people to do. I did it with 2 of us and we achieved it under budget, blah, 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 blah. So that's an achievement. It's a skills area. It's also work experience you did in a job. So you've brought them all together. It doesn't need to be the longest sentence, and save the company X amount, but you've won them over on all other areas sort of thing. So, that certainly helped.
I think when you are doing the achievements under the bullet point, you're pulling out that, as Mike said, you're showcasing your skill set anyway.
Yeah.
In different areas.
And Ira, just as we wrap up, and then we'll get any other questions from you guys. So just unmute yourselves and check yourselves in there. So Ira, any other bits? I've just got a couple more points I was going to bring up.
No, I think sort of we've discussed everything. It's been quite a nice session, actually, this one, especially with a lot of the questions, because I think sort of some of the questions you guys have asked are some things that sort of we may not have necessarily brought up in the last bounce back session about CVs. So it's good to sort of get everyone's opinion. So any other questions, more than welcome.
I think also, Katie also brought it up earlier, and I put a star by it because I think it's still so relevant, and it sort of crosses over between your CV resume and actually social media, and sort of a linkage between this and next week with LinkedIn as well. So, and it's a practical story. So I was at a drinks party given for the speakers when I was speaking in Chicago. And I was talking to this group of interns, and they were sort of doing their final year, and they did a practice thing with the Treasury Management Association of Chicago, TMAC. Great guys all round, and they were sort of saying, oh, how powerful do you think it is? How important? I went, guys, it's totally essential. You need to lock up your Facebook, be careful with your LinkedIn, careful on Instagram and all this stuff. And they were like, yeah, okay, Mike, blah, blah, blah. And one of the guys, sort of Josh or whatever his name was, I think it was. And I said, Josh, could you grab me a beer or something? And I wasn't being condescending, so I said, go give me a beer. He went to get me a beer and stuff. I said, Josh, and he was saying, oh, he's really done it, and he was looking for an internship. And I said, how was Tijuana? He's like, what do you mean Tijuana? That was last year. How do you know about that? And I was like, I use a very little known thing called Google, and used it on my phone and showed him. And I just searched his name, done a couple of searches of him and stuff. And he'd been tagged in one of his friends' photos. And he was there, snorkeling a bottle of beer, going, look at this. And he was absolutely terrified. He said, I'm applying for jobs with like Procter & Gamble and some of the top companies here in Chicago. And I said, yeah, and that appears on your timeline. Just watch out, mate. And it's just, and I think that's the key thing. I think nowadays, if it's on social media, it's public. It's public media. Anyone can get hold of it. So, and you guys, don't feel too bad by doing a Google search for yourselves. That's why I particularly don't have any Facebook, because I think, God, I never have a business. I've had a business. Don't say that. All right, watch it, Hardy. Any other questions, anyone? No, we're all good. You're all looking forward to LinkedIn week. That's what it is, Katie. They've just gone. Oh, Ian's got a question. Yeah, go. Timmerman, I knew you'd have a good one. Go for it, sir.
Just a quick one on the ATS, the automated filtering.
What, tracking system and stuff when you're applying for jobs, or?
Yeah. So you mentioned that a lot of the skills are given for the type of role that you had in your past.
Yeah.
But wouldn't those systems be looking for those responsibilities that you had to compare to a job description?
Well, they could be. And again, what you might have is your CV is, as I say, a basic structure. So you might, if you're going for an ATS or something like that, you might, and for those people that are listening, what's an ATS? So when you're applying for a job and they computer scan it, basically they scan through the relevant words and you'll score higher if you've got them. And they do the same for LinkedIn when they're trying to source you for jobs. What you might want to do is have a paragraph that is sort of, not results achievement orientated, but as you say, key skills. But you don't include it if your CV or resume is going to be read by a human, you probably don't want it there, or you want to try and push it away, sort of thing. But if it's just going to be scanned automatically, said your ATS has requested, you could even put it in those terms, for your applicant tracking. See that some of my key skills are this. I mean, Katie, you were in HR before and you had it firsthand.
I think one of the things is I implemented an ATS system when I was in house, and it's very, a lot of it is very much around making it easy for the in-house recruiters. When it pulls, you're right, it does pull keywords, but most of the time, I say this just from the experience I have, most of the ATS systems will focus, when you have a role that comes on and you want to look at the candidate pool that you've got on your ATS system, it tends to be based on job title, location, and the key top line, things like that, rather than necessarily, key skill sets. Sorry?
Rather than cash management or...
Yeah. And the thing to have an ATS system in-house is purely to be able to move people through the process, be able to do reporting. It's not it's more of a admin kind of resource rather than something like LinkedIn that's all to do with buzzwords and things like that. So what tends to also happen on an ATS system, when I implemented one, it used to be based, how you were ranked, if you like, was based on you going through 2 different surveys, if you like, which again you would implement your skill sets and you'd be asked to do that. So I don't think it's necessary to have that key skill set unless it's specifically asked within the ATS system. But I would be most of them are quite standard and basic. As I said, it's more to do with admin control rather than anything else.
Yeah. What we do, we've just got one question, I think, which is worthy of answering actually before. What advice would you give to someone that's not qualified in Treasury, is a qualified accountant, works mainly in Treasury accounting from Tracy, rather than a normal Treasury role for their CV? And Tracy, feel free to unmute yourself and join in. Just to qualify the question, is this when you're asking? So we've got another couple of questions, which is great. What advice would you give to someone is when you're sort of looking at Treasury roles? Do you mean, or what do you mean?
Yeah, looking at Treasury roles, looking at finance Treasury roles, what I'm finding at the moment is, because I've been working as essentially a Treasury accountant, so all my role is all my accounting role and is Treasury for the last maybe 4 or 5 years is Treasury related. Yet I'm not doing, say, the standard role a treasurist would do, like the hedgings and all the different type of stuff that you guys would do. Yet, I'm kind of being pigeonholed against a normal finance role as well. And, I do enjoy the area of Treasury and I do enjoy working in this area. But yet when I go for a Treasury related role, because I don't have, say, the standard Treasury skill sets, I'm being overlooked.
So I think what you do is you go for the mid role between it. So you go.
They're rare.
Treasury manager role dash control, or Treasury controller role. I've just recruited a Treasury controller position for a guy that had been Treasury front office, but been Treasury qualified accountant. Mixture of things. I think what you do. I think it is. The problem is it's slightly a buyer's market, which you just described there, which is a bit frustrating for a lot of people, because there's a greater pressure on. And again, I see a lot of the treasurers on this screen. If they recruit someone, and they were to recruit someone like yourself for a Treasury front office role, they say, great, okay, how much is that person, their learning curve? And the problem is they say, well, I need a person to know 60 to 80% of the job from day one. And you're like, well, where's their learning curve? If they're only going to learn 10 or 20% of the job. But they say, oh, tough. I'm a treasurer. I've got loads on my plate. I need to get this person hitting the ground running and everything else. So I think perhaps what you maybe focus on, and there are the roles that come through, the Treasury controller roles.
That's what I have. It's Treasury controller role.
Yeah, exactly. So, or just trying to find the roles that sort of blend, stuff. And the problem is at the moment, I think it's a tough market.
It is.
Everything's paused. I think it will improve as we get towards the end of this year. I think also, I want to come back to the CV stuff, but, for, again, the people listening, people talk about what held people back in previous years, Treasury bonuses. Usually people would be thinking about getting a bonus towards the end of the year. They'd be held back. They wouldn't be looking. There aren't any bonuses this year. Bonuses are through the floor. So I think there will be a more fluid market come September, October. And as the market starts to recover, it's a new kind of weird kind of market. But I saw a really good piece from Noy Group earlier, and they were talking about they'd done every bit of the interview non-face-to-face, and then the final stages they did across a table, coffees with masks on, but they got to know the person a little bit. So, again, a lot of the time, perhaps Tracy, we can speak after the today's call, but and again, week 6 of our program is about Treasury search strategy, so we can talk about that as well. You have to come back for more. There's more of it.
Great, thank you.
So, that's all right.
And in answer to the question about having an uncommon language like Mandarin and Chinese, is there any point including it on the CV? Yes.
Yes, cool.
I definitely think it is because, I know from the clients that I'm recruiting for at the moment, they're huge they're multinational, and they have presence across the globe. So actually you never know when there's going to be a need or a requirement for somebody to speak another language. So I just think if you've got it and you're confident in it and it's at a certain level, you should include it on your CV.
Yeah, I think, well, again, is a level of fluency, which I think you need to be quite, you mentioned it earlier about French versus English. I think if you can properly speak it, then say yes about the spoken. You need to be very clear about it. Well, one of the reasons I say that is because, and you're saying, you know, if you can speak something like that, the funny thing is, I actually know clients that would interview you now that I could pick up. They don't have jobs. They're not particularly, but they would, you know, they would welcome you and they go, oh, hang on, if that person can speak Mandarin, I'd like to talk to them, because they even could manufacture a job for it because it's such a in-demand skill sort of thing. Aira, what are your thoughts?
I mean, sort of, I think if you can speak another language and you're in a multinational company, it would be really useful for sort of maybe forging relationship with banks that are based in other countries. Sort of it show a bit of respect, sort of especially with the sort of the Mandarin and sort of Chinese, that would show respect over there. So I think definitely show it off, but just make sure if you're going to say you're fluent, make sure you are fluent and you're not going to turn up and they want you to speak French and you're just talking nonsense. That's a waste of your time and the client's time.
A bit like Joey on Friends, wasn't it, when he was talking French?
Yeah, it's like blah, 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 blah. Just don't do that. Please.
That's my French, anyways. Just a really good point from Carol. Wouldn't getting the CTP or the European equivalent help advance Tracy towards what she wants? I think brilliant idea. It would definitely also, and it's a little bit of a cheeky one, but if you start studying AMCT, everyone assumes you're going to finish it, even if you don't know, because most people finish it. Even if they fail a couple of exams, people keep on going through. So it says AMCT currently studying, and actually I think CTP on a distance basis is easier, better to do, because they've got a better long distance training program. I think they've worked at it for longer. The only problem with that is it depends on who Tracy would be applying to. Would they want and be bothered about AMCT? If she's working in Europe,
I'm based in Dublin.
Yeah. So again, so if you're looking for it depends on the different clients. So, if you're in the UK, Ava said it before, everyone wants AMCT, must have it. If you're working for a US corporate and had CTP, they'd really like it. If you're in Europe, I previously asked the treasurer of Colgate. I said, "Oh, do you want AMCT?" I said, "What's that?" He was like, he didn't care. He said, "No, I'm not bothered." It depends on the person. Katie, Ava, what are you guys thinking? Yeah, Ava.
What I would say is it's very dependent as well on the group treasurer, the qualifications that they like. So I know I placed a role recently for a risk manager position, but the group treasurer liked an ACCA qualified candidate. So the group treasurer does sometimes have preference as to what qualification you have, but they're very keen. I think if you show a willingness to want to study further as well, that's something that will go quite far, I think, with interviews and sort of help you get there as well, I think.
I think that also comes down to the research process. You're applying for a job, and yes, you might have to apply to an HR person, but at some stage your CV is going to land on the treasurer's desk. Well, look at what the treasurer's qualified in. Have they got an MCT? Have they got a CTP? Have they got an MBA? Are they ACCA qualified? Are they an accountant? It's basic stuff. If you're applying for a job, you want the person who's at the top of the tree to like you. You want them to want to interview you. So look at what they've got and then decide from there. We got Jonathan, who's good wrap-up question about ATS. Best to assume every position vacancy will be using ATS. No, a lot of them don't. But what you can have is, people say, "Oh, I'm going to write a CV for every," change. Now, have a basic fundamental CV done. Maybe have some notes to the side that you can copy and paste in, and depends on the job. Again, when you have a CV that's for a certain treasurer, as I say, who has, is really accountancy focused, you're an accountant, great. Oh, you're actually ACT qualified. Oh, we'll actually focus on what you've done with the Association of Treasurers. Tailor your approach, and then you're going to enhance your success, because otherwise you won't get it, sort of thing. Katie, it's your week, so any final words before I tell them that the best week will be next week, which is LinkedIn week? Anyway, sorry. I didn't say that.
No, I think that's about all. As I said, there's a lot more detail in the guide that we sent through as well.
Yeah. And what we'll do is resend that. Well, I've got the attendee list for today, so I'll copy and paste that out and send it out to everyone as well. So, yeah. Cool. Carol, I'm going to answer that later because it's been an hour. You lot have had, been amazing. Some great questions today. Thank you very much. And make the questions easy next week about LinkedIn. I love it. Great. All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers.